Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Fred McGhee. I am the founder and president of Fred L. McGhee and Associates, the only African-American and disabled veteran owned and operated historic preservation firm in the city of Austin. I'm also a member of our city's fine Board of Adjustment, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my comments. I'm looking forward to engaging you in discussion and dialogue about my nomination, which is the byproduct of a lot of work. Unfortunately, I was not given the courtesy by staff of being notified that this was going to be an agenda item today. I only found out about this a couple of days ago, which is kind of unfortunate. So I would like to ask you formally on the record that whatever decision that you render, that I, my firm, at my contact information that is listed in the nomination itself, be notified in writing formally by this body about what your recommendations are. That's really all I wanted to say. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. McGhee, would you please tell us a little bit about the architectural and historic significance of Rosewood Courts?
Oh, I'm happy to do so. The Rosewood Courts Historic District, by the way. And I want to make that very plain. I guess I did have one more thing that I wanted to mention. What was submitted was a historic district nomination. And that is something that I'm going to make very plain to the THC, and I want to make very plain to staff and make very plain to you guys. Rosewood Courts Historic District. It meets the criteria for a historic district. That is the way that I submitted it. Rosewood Courts is one of the original public housing projects in America, not just in Austin. It was built in 1938 and 1939 with a second portion built in 1940 and opened for use in 1941 on New Year's Day. Austin, Texas is the location of the oldest public housing in America. The oldest three public housing authorities in the United States are New York City, New Orleans, and Austin, Texas. Rosewood started construction on the same day as Santa Rita Courts. Santa Rita is a property that I entered into the National Register a few years back, for which I was given a Heritage Society of Austin award. And that one was completed first. It's a 40-unit complex that's on East 2nd Street. And that famous picture of Lyndon Baines Johnson on his knees, okay, that you probably have seen before, you may or may not have seen it. That picture was taken at Santa Rita Courts on the day that the housing project opened. So Rosewood was the housing development that was constructed for African Americans. The first three housing projects in Austin were segregated. There were a lot of reasons for this. The federal law, the 1937 U.S. Housing Act, mandated this. It was a condition of passage, and President Roosevelt agreed to this, that the housing that would be constructed by the law would be segregated in southern states. So that's why the Housing Authority requested in its initial funding allocation funding for three housing projects: 40 units at Santa Rita Courts, 60 units at Rosewood initially, later upgraded, and 86 units at Chalmers Courts. Those are the original three public housing projects in the city of Austin. Therefore, this property is of national significance, not just local or state significance. There's a lot more that I could say. A lot of it's in the nomination. I could continue if you want me to.
No, I just wanted to get an overview of it and of the nomination and what the project was about.
It's probably worthwhile to note as well, Commissioner Myers, that Austin's population in 1930 was give or take about 50,000 people. In 1940, it was about 87,000 people. Austin, Texas was a small regional town in those years, and it was really a quite remarkable achievement on the part of our newly elected Congressman Lyndon Johnson to secure this housing under this new federal law. The construction of that housing utterly revolutionized real estate in Austin. Nothing like it had existed before. People at that time during the Great Depression were living in hovels and shacks. It really was an amazing thing. The city had barely adopted zoning. Building standards were all but non-existent. I document that in the nomination. The housing, from an architectural perspective, is also significant because it represents the first modernist structures, residential structures, in Austin. The 37 Housing Act, which gave us the United States Housing Authority and public housing authorities, was largely the byproduct of advocacy on the part of Lewis Mumford, an iconic American planner, Catherine Bauer, who was his protege, Edith Elmer Wood, and people along those lines, who advocated strongly during the Great Depression that the United States should embark on a program of government housing construction based on the European model. That became known in the United States as the international style. The international style it's an interesting architectural movement, and there have been many variants of it. The part that people usually get taught in school is the stuff like glass houses that you can see through. In other words, housing built for the bourgeoisie. In fact, the European origins of the style, which I make clear in this nomination, lie in European social housing, particularly from Germany, Austria, and England. That's something that's not commonly acknowledged. It's something, if it is acknowledged, that's usually kind of shunted aside. And I wanted to make very clear that the origins of the international style lie in that communitarian philosophy of construction of affordable housing for the masses.
I commend you on this. I'm really glad that this nomination is going forward.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Commissioner Myers. I appreciate it.
I had a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Of the 4 categories, just what are the distinct categories under which you're submitting? A, B, C, or D? National Register.
I'm submitting under criteria A, B, and C. It has an association with Lyndon Baines Johnson. Actually, let me thumb through the portion I actually have in my summary statement here. I'm nominating it as being significant under social history and politics / government, under ethnic heritage. I didn't talk about Rosewood Courts and its construction atop Emancipation Park. It's in the nomination. For a long time in Austin, people wondered where Emancipation Park was. One of the things that I was able to do in my research for this nomination is to definitively answer that question, where Austin's original Black-owned Juneteenth parade ground was. And it's underneath Rosewood Courts, as shown in the documents that you were furnished. So under ethnic heritage, and of course Juneteenth is now a national holiday. Of course it's a Texas holiday. We here in Texas know what it is, but this is a holiday now that is celebrated in over half of the states. So this property would be historic on those grounds alone. It's important under community planning and development. Under conditions of segregation, African Americans were able to do some remarkable things. One of them is to do something like create an Emancipation Park that was used for Juneteenth celebrations at a time when this property was outside the city limits. It was in the outskirts of Austin. Its architectural significance, I think I've kind of hinted at. Early first-generation USHA housing, United States Housing Authority housing, was constructed and is these are paradigmatic examples of the international style in the United States. It is essentially European-style housing. Those of you who've probably been to Europe or to Germany and have looked at some of the Siedlungen that I cite in here, Rosewood Courts is firmly within that tradition. One of the progenitors of the international style, Walter Gropius and Marcel Breuer, I cite them in here as well, and I compare Rosewood favorably with Aluminum City Terrace, which is, and of course everybody knows who Gropius is, right? He's somebody that you learn about in architecture school. Or if you're an architectural historian, you learn about in your architectural history courses. These people cut their teeth in terms of planning and in terms of architecture, constructing public works, public housing. They did a bunch of other things too, private residences and other sorts of things. But this is an important part of their architectural legacy that our city is, quite honestly, privileged to have, and that should have been recognized a long time ago. So under architecture, so actually those are the ones. social history and politics, government, ethnic heritage, community planning and development, architecture, and of course for its association with our beloved congressman, later senator, later vice president, and then president. By the way, Lyndon Johnson is one of the few people who were president who actually had served at every stage of government. He ran President Roosevelt's National Youth Administration, so he was a staffer in the executive branch. He then, of course, was elected in a special election in 1937, which bypassed the Jim Crow primary system in Texas at that time that did not give African Americans the franchise. It allowed Johnson to shrewdly court Mexican American and African American support, which he sought and received, which was crucial to his election victory in 1937. That's another reason why this housing project was built. And then, of course, he got elected to the Senate, and he was a strong supporter of the 1949 Housing Act, which gave us urban renewal. And then, during his tenure as president, Lyndon Johnson gave us the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the National Historic Preservation Act, among many other things. This is a man who was a champion of public housing and public beautification throughout his entire political career. In 1968, when he passed the Fair Housing Act, and also the Rebecca Baines Johnson development, an experimental development that we all know, I'm sure of, he made some poignant comments looking back on his 30-plus year advocacy for housing affordability and fairness for all ethnicities and all races. That's an important part of the legacy of this city. It's something that is worthy of commemoration, and not something that should be casually tossed aside for some abstract theory related to new urbanism, or because we think the people that live there now are somehow deficient and need our guidance and assistance, without due consideration of this history that I'm elucidating and that this nomination makes very plain.
Dr. McGhee, I would also commend you on your efforts with this application. I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed that in addition to the 27 buildings that are cited as contributing to the district, there's also 5 objects. What are those? I'm just curious.
5 objects?
Oh, is that not correct?
Well, the THC might have stuck those in there. I don't know what they mean.
Okay.
I mean, they removed those 2 crucial words, historic district, from my nomination, and they stuck in 5 objects. I don't know what the 5 objects are. My understanding with the
Maybe
THC...
it's a typo.
Huh?
Maybe it's a typo.
It could be. I don't know. I'll have to find out. I mean, to be perfectly frank, tonight was the first time that I actually looked at what the draft that is on the website for the State Board of Review to consider. I hadn't looked at it before because I was given assurance that this nomination would, and of course I worked with, this isn't just like, take it or leave it. I mean, there was a process of, how this goes, you make sausage, But basically, after negotiation, my understanding is that the nomination would go forward to the Board of Review as written. And as written included those words, historic district, and 0 contributing objects. But 5, I don't know what, maybe they know something. It could be a typo. Maybe
right above that section, it does say district. It says category of property in district.
Well, yeah, yes. I mean, it says it, and I'll have to get clarification from the THC about what it's going to get submitted as, if it's going to go through as a historic district. It should go through as a historic district. Santa Rita did not go through as a historic district. I accepted that at that time. That was a mistake on my part.
It went through as one resource?
Correct. Just Santa Rita Courts. It's not I initially submitted it as the Santa Rita Courts Historic District, but it became Santa Rita Courts, even though it's obviously a district and meets the National Register Bulletin guidance for a historic district. The same is true here. I mean, public housing projects usually are nominated as districts. So,
thank you very much. Does anyone have any other questions?
I don't have a question for Dr. McGhee, but I do have questions